Hello and welcome back to Let the Stone Speak. I'm Brent Nagtegaal, the host of the program. The Bible mentions that the commodity of ivory in association with royalty, royal figures, palaces. But just where did the ivory of biblical times come from? I just got done interviewing Dr. Harel Shochat. He's from the School of Archaeology and Maritime Cultures at the University of Haifa, and he just wrote a paper on this topic. The paper is entitled 1,000 Years of Nubian Supply of Sub-Saharan Ivory to the Southern Levant circa 1600 to 600 B.C.E, or around about the time that Jerusalem was destroyed. So for today's program, we're going to play this interview for you all about all you ever wanted to know about ivory and the way it made its way to the land of Canaan. Hopefully there's going to be a follow-up interview with Harel in the future, as he's already in publication process for a new article about some more of the different elements of the archaeological context in which the ivory was found. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel if you enjoy these interviews. And if you would like the written word about the interviews and then also biblical archaeology in general, you can apply for an application. Well, you can apply to receive our magazine, Let the Stone Speak. It comes out 6 times per year. It's absolutely free. All you need to do to request a subscription to the magazine is go to our website, armstronginstitute.org. and scroll down to a place where you'll find where you can enter your details, or you can write an email to letters@armstronginstitute.org and simply put your name and address, and we'll sign you up for your free subscription. Thanks very much for watching, and here's the interview with Dr. Harel Shochat. Dr. Harel Shochat, thanks very much for coming on our show.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you've just completed and published this amazing comprehensive study of ivory items discovered in the Levant, ranging from a huge period of time as well. Is this the first kind of comprehensive study of its kind, documenting the source and the origin of ivory found in this area?
In general, I would say yes. At least these kinds of a synthetic study that deals with the entire phenomenon of ivory and spanning like you said, the late bronze to the Iron Ages. I would say because the ivory artifacts are very beautiful, right? They display high-end art, like the most sophisticated we can find. And therefore, many of the objects were examined by themselves, like
Right.
more or less the more elaborate or more nicely done objects were studied and searched for parallels, but never in the context of the entire phenomenon to see the context of the finds, where the material originated, and these sorts of questions.
So well done with this. I take it would have taken a long time to comprise this database of items. How did this come about? How long did it take you to produce this? Was it a subject of your PhD? I can't recall. And what did it develop from that?
So it was my PhD study, basically. So it took me about 3.5, 4 years to study the assemblage. Most of the items are created either at museums, like again, nicely made artifacts, which I could reach more or less easily if it's like the Israel Museum or the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem. And most of them are still are in the Israeli Antiquity Authority, National Treasury. It took me, I would say, to study the entire material about 2 years, more or less, during COVID. So I, drove. I got specific permits to get to the IAA where there was no one else there,
Right.
and it was quite of a journey, an interesting one, I have to say.
So as far as reaching the public eye, the paper that you've published in the Journal of Archaeological Science, it's entitled 1,000 Years of Nubian Supply of Sub-Saharan Ivory to the Southern Levant, circa 1600 to 600 BCE. So this doesn't necessarily relate to the ornate nature of the objects or what they depict or the artistic element of them, but mainly where did they get their ivory from? So, if we could discuss what ivory is, and then how it was used, I guess, in the cultures that you're discussing briefly, and then how can we distinguish or how can we narrow down the source of the ivory as well?
So actually, I would say that this is one part. The scope of the study was too comprehensive in order to, present everything in one publication,
Hmm.
or let's say in a journal publication. So this is the first of two papers. The
Great.
second one is now being ready for press. And this would deal with the context, the questions of where ivory was consumed, by who, and
Okay.
for what purposes.
Great.
Okay, that would be the second part.
We can have you
Uh,
back on the show for that, so
Thank you very
we can
much. I'd be
discuss it then.
happy. I'd be happy to, because there are also very interesting results there, I
Okay.
have to say. So in this paper, we focused more on the scientific analysis that we made, which includes basically biomolecular analysis. First of all, biomolecular and microscopic observations in order to determine the origins. And then we focus on the exchange network itself. Like, the starting point, it's the ending point, and then to discuss the agents involved in this trade
Okay.
mechanism. So we used like the first step because there are hundreds, over 6 kilo. In total, I examined if we include like Ozzo's artifacts, bone and ivory, in order to discriminate between the two, because some of them, we can produce similar or like objects from bone as well. It depends on the size, of course. And the
Hmm.
more big and elaborate objects are not being, you cannot make it from bone. But for the small items, if it's like inlays and stuff, you can also make it from bone. So over total of over 1,600 artifacts that examine, and over a third of those were ivories.
Okay.
So the first stage was to discriminate the taxon, whether because there are two possible origins. We can say three possible origins.
Of ivory.
Eventually, of the ivory, yeah.
Hmm.
Essentially, ivory is a teeth.
Hmm.
Okay, it's a tusk or a teeth that project beyond the lips. Okay, for used for various purposes, and then but biologically, anatomically, it's the same, made of dentine. But each species, okay, and if we will deal with the species in a moment, but each species has its own unique micromorphological nuances in order for us to use under a microscope and discriminate which taxate was used from. In our region, there are several origins we can say of ivory,
Hmm.
okay, in the world. For our regions, the most relevant are the elephant, of course, elephant tusk, and hippopotamus canines,
Hmm.
lower canines, because they are a bigger, and also the canines of boars, wild boars. But these are
Okay.
relatively small, and you can produce small artifacts. We found some, but it's not the majority was either elephant or hippopotamus. Um, and that was the first stage. So to discriminate, because there is a basic difference. Elephants were extinct from the region of the Levant. There are several reconstructions, but let's say the latest one would be around 125,000 years ago.
Okay.
Okay. So clearly out of the scope of the study. So it means that if we find elephant ivory, it means that it was definitely exported. It's exotic and exported from afar. Okay. And then we have hippopotamus that at least until the end of the second millennium BCE, it is reconstructed that they inhabited several regions in the Southern Levant, especially
Okay.
along the coast and where you have larger streams or rivers,
Hmm.
aquatic, inland aquatic environments. Okay. So it means that if we find more hippo, for example, it can attest to local production,
Thinking
etc.
of a hippo in the Yukon is kind of scary.
It's a kind of, it was for sure. for
So
sure.
so that hasn't happened for 3,000 years. So,
Yeah. And they were extinct at some point,
mhm.
more or less 10th century BC. Um, so again, then again, if we're talking about the time before that, let's say the late Bronze Age, Hippo ivory could mean that it was local. Or
Okay.
if we talk about the Iron Age too, which already, right, starts, let's say in the 9th century BC or 10 or 9th century BC, then it means that they should be non-local
Right.
as well, like the elephants. So the first was microscopic examination, and then we had biomolecular investigation, which is really cool, I think. But you can actually reconstruct. First of all, we used a method that is called zooarchaeology by mass spectrometry,
Hmm.
which can validate. Okay, it's a proteomic analysis, so it targets the proteins, which is also unique for each mammalian species, and therefore we can verify,
Okay.
okay, the microscopic examination and stable isotope analysis that can tell us about the diet of the elephants
Okay.
and the environment that they grew in. And
Wow.
therefore we can reconstruct where did they come from. This three-step protocol enable the reconstruction of at least the beginning, let's say, of the sourcing pools of the ivory.
So going back to my elementary school, um, I remember there's two main types of elephants, the ones with the big ears and the ones with the smaller ears. Um, so one's from Asia generally, and one's from Africa.
Yeah.
Is there more than that, or that's kind of our
Look, for current species, this is
okay,
okay, their latest relative was the mammoth that was extinct,
okay.
okay, a
So
while
you
ago. But
you were able to break it down to determine what species or what animal it was, and then you can go even further to determine whether it was African or Asian elephant
yeah,
as well.
the zooms, the proteomic analysis can also tell us about that because they originate from two branches of the Proboscidea order. So basically, the Asian elephants is related to the mammoth.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's one species, and then Um, the African elephants are a Loxodonta species or family, which is like comes from a different branch from the Elephas antiquus that was inhabiting this region as well. But as I said, long time ago, um, and because they were diverse, they diverged like
Hmm.
2 million or so years ago. You can see it in the genes, basically in the proteins, okay, and identify the variety, okay, or the difference between them.
Okay,
So that was, yeah.
and so what were some of your conclusions as you went through this process?
So first of all, it was quite a surprising result that we found that all of our elephants are African. So it comes from all the elephant ivory comes from African origin.
Hmm.
Um, in contrast to what it usually says in the common literature, when you read that, it says following this and that distribution or ancient distribution maps of the elephants as being reconstructed or as agreed that they were inhabiting, for example, the Asian elephant, according to some maps, inhabited all the way through southern Mesopotamia, which brings it as a much closer source for ivory, let's say, or at least if you have some kind of interactions, right? Trade interactions with Mesopotamia, then it's a
Hmm.
feasible source. So everywhere it says that both sources are equally equally used, or not equally, but are possibly can be used. And also, when you talked about the ears, for example, we have some Egyptian and also Assyrian depictions, okay, ancient depictions of elephants, and describing some morphological nuances that previous scholars also tried to suggest that they were either the Asian or the African species, okay,
Okay,
based on what they see.
right.
So if the ears are small, as you said, then it's usually being considered an Asian elephant.
Hmm.
Um,
But you've gotten to the bottom of this, and you realize that all the ivory that's here for 1,000 years has not come from the Asian elephant, but come from the African
no,
one.
yeah.
And then
And
as a
it's quite remarkable to have a
r-
sustained network, let's say, that operates for 1,000 years. That's, I would say,
absolutely.
really interesting. Yeah.
And then as I went through your paper, you could even dig down even deeper than that and discover the environment in which the elephant that produced the ivory was in based on what it ate as well, correct?
Yeah. That we did with the stable isotope analysis. So I won't go into the details, but in general, we differentiate, or isotopically, we can differentiate on a diet based on leaves,
Hmm.
okay, like trees and shrubs and whatever, and a diet that is based on grasses, okay,
Okay.
because they have two different photosynthesis mechanisms that differentiate them and then create some kind of a difference in the carbon isotopes, which we usually know the carbon 14, right?
Hmm.
But there is another isotope, which is carbon 13, and then you measure the ratio between it, between the carbon
Right.
13 and the carbon 12, which is the most abundant that we have. And then you can assume or you can reconstruct whether they ate more grasses or they lived in a grassy, let's say, savanna or grasslands environment, or if they lived in a closed canopy forest, and what is the, we can say, the density of the forest, because it's also changes the ratio of these of the isotopes that we measure.
And I will say that if anyone is interested in getting down into these details, we'll put the your journal article in the show notes. I'll admit I skipped over a little bit of the technical jargon to get to your some of your
Sure,
conclusions
for
for it.
sure.
And so you matched up the when you went through this process, you then limited your region of focus based on grasslands
Yeah.
and canopied forests and
Yeah.
so on. And
That's also enabled, being enabled by Africa's unique phytogeographic landscape. Okay. Like
mhm,
basically everything centers through the humid African rainforest, right? And then to the north and south of it, you get less rain, it's kind of a mirror image,
mhm,
okay, of both regions. In the northern part of Africa, it's between the rainforest and the Sahara, of course, the Sahara Desert. And then you get like these latitudinal vegetal landscape, which roughly correspond the same, or isotopically, we assume that they would look the same.
mhm,
But this is not enough because let's say they are stretched across the width of Africa, and then you should still narrow it down.
right.
So then we also need to consider archaeological and historical evidence that we have, right?
Yep.
For example, the Nile.
Mhm,
Okay, and the Nile, which is the main thoroughfare of crossing the Sahara from south to north, let's say, which was the major trading route for many, we can say, resources that we know, and it was also, we know it by archaeological evidence of excavated materials that were sourced there, or by even accounts, like historical accounts. The Egyptians describe that they use this thoroughfare to get to the south, or by sailing, but it's also a possibility. So we consider these both options, and then we assume that the region should be upstream the White Nile, where
mhm,
you have the environment that we reconstructed based on the diet,
mhm.
and it has the route, the potential route, the potential path.
So narrowing it down, you said just then that the two sources of the Nile, Blue and White Nile, this goes, I guess they go down towards modern day Ethiopia, um, and this is the region, the White Nile, that you said that the ivory came from through
Yeah.
majority. And was there a fluctuation or a difference in the throughout this 1,000 year period? Like some in earlier parts, it came from a different area, or basically it's in the same locale.
So we can say that within this broad region, you see differences based now no on not only on carbon isotopes, but also on hydrogen and oxygen, and also nitrogen that reflects we can say aridity levels and also precipitation regimes.
Hmm.
So basically, these helped us carbon-wise. We can say that all of them came from within a single region. That's why we've been able to reconstruct it. But then you see differences that probably accounts for different precipitation regimes, and we call it like ecological niches. So within the broad environment that we reconstruct, we do have different niches. Would be much more complicated, I would say, to reconstruct exactly where from. And our biggest problem is the reference data.
Right.
Okay, so there is a discontinuous reference data
So,
that we can use. So this was much of our limitations.
but you're fairly confident, as brought up by your paper, that you've got the general area right, and that it was a long-standing thousand-year trade or
Yeah.
thousand-year movement of ivory. As far as the artifacts that you could study from the Levant, from this area of ancient Canaan or Israel, do you see a period of a lot of ivory being used and producing items compared to other periods through this 1,000 years?
So there are fluctuations and changes, trends, we can say, consumption trends, if we look from
Hmm.
the angle of the Southern Levant. Um, So the late Bronze Age was a time also being sometimes referred to as the first globalized era of the East Mediterranean, right? That the kings of Egypt and Mesopotamia and Hatti, Cyprus exchanged gift between them, and ivory was definitely one of those, let's say, gifts or materials that were exchanged between these great kings, and some of it percolated, of course, down to the Southern Levant, was then controlled by Imperial Egypt.
Hmm.
So there is a peak. There is a peak of, we can say, of ivory consumption, especially if you compare it to previous periods, where we already have ivories in the Southern Levant since the end of the 5th millennium BC, from the Chalcolithic period. But it's a little bit slowly by slowly, and then suddenly you have this big consumption peak in the late Bronze Age, and especially the later period of it. So we're
Okay.
talking about, if we want centuries, it would be about the 14, 13, 12 centuries BC, more or
Okay.
less.
Okay.
And then there is decline during the Iron Age 1, which was generally and now already disproved to be the Dark Age. Okay, at least when it comes to exchange materials, we see that although we reconstruct the geopolitics in the Southern Levant as not being ruled by, kings of city-states or the Kingdom of Judah or the Kingdom of Israel that developed, let's say, later, but still we see exchange coming and going, especially in the coastal plain, along the coastal
Hmm.
plains, coastal sites, let's say, of the Phoenicians, the early Phoenicians, or along the northern coastal plain, or the Philistines that also consume
So you're
ivory.
so you're saying you've got this period, and I just want to just so people
Yeah,
can have aware of their historical reconstruction. If I can put a biblical period to it, you have the end of the late Bronze into the start of Iron One, which would be the time period though you have the nascent Israelite tribes there, but no nation,
yeah.
and then into the Iron One
A
period,
decentralized, we say a
decentralized. So
decentralized.
yeah, so it's like more of a tribal society.
Yeah,
And yet at that same time period, you do have ivory items being found along the coast,
along
Philistine
the,
areas south, and then into Phoenicia.
yeah.
And then that goes through a shift as well later on.
Yeah, and the shift comes with the largest apex of ivory consumption that we see in the Iron Tomb.
So it's
And the
larger than
Iron,
what you would see in the late bronze.
numerically, I won't, I don't consider like capacity. Let's say it's very hard to do
Yes,
these kinds of math, but
absolutely.
yeah, when we count for objects, yes. And then we see that most of the ivories comes from Samaria.
Hmm.
Okay, in during the Iron Age 2B, we can say, so the peak of the Kingdom of Israel. Okay, then you have a consumption peak and also Jerusalem. So it's not, you have them everywhere, and you would find ivories also in we can say the secondary administrative centers like Megiddo and Chatzor, and you find in Bet Shemesh and Lachish in the south.
Hmm.
Okay? But the peak, the peak of consumption is, we can say, in the capital cities.
Which is what, yeah, just to make that clear for everybody, Samaria, the capital of
The kingdom of
Israel
Israel
from Omri and
and
Ahab's
Jerusalem, the
time.
capital of the kingdom of Judah. Yeah.
And that's where you find, which indicates that these ivory objects are items of prestige, royalty, even that they're used by. Maybe you've got this beautiful backdrop
Yeah.
behind you
You can
there.
see, for
Yes,
example, this.
yeah.
There you go.
So
Where is
maybe
it?
you can
This one?
point. Yeah, maybe you can just explain just a few of them, the kind of items that are produced using the ivory, and then just where they were found. I suppose I see Samaria written there, but maybe if you can explain.
Samaria, yeah, it's upside down. But this column over here, these are mainly inlays. That was the main artifacts that we found. Ivory made artifacts from Samaria are all inlays that used to adorn um, probably wooden, furniture. So you cover the entire, okay, let's say from complete, the only complete examples that we have for this kind of furniture comes from Cyprus from the 8th century BCE. And there we
Okay.
see that the entire furniture chair was covered with ivory inlays. So just imagine, I don't know if you can see very clearly, but you have the lotus bud and flowers over here, and
Hmm.
you have some Egyptian deities, and you have the lion, and you have, this is quite familiar, right? This is the palm-shaped. It was used also as a royal symbol for the capital, the titles on columns and whatever, right? This
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
so
The capitals, the volute capitals.
evolute, yeah, yeah.
So these are all items from Samaria, and this is
These, yeah.
interesting as related to the Bible, um, because I think
Because
these. Yeah. Go ahead.
it says the Bible tells us that King Ahab built a house of ivory at Samaria.
Hmm.
So of course we shouldn't take it as literally build a house of ivory and just from ivory, but we can understand that it reflects the reality that we do find in Samaria. That many of the furnitures there were covered or made of ivory, means that that's what the person who came to visit the king saw, right? These magnificent ivories, and they were found in adjacent to one of the buildings that is suggested to be some kind of an ivory carving workshop.
Oh wow.
Okay. Yeah.
And then some of the other items you have back there, they're from an
Okay.
earlier
And
period.
this side, the rest are from the late Bronze Age, which again we have wonderful items. I didn't brought here from the Iron One because these are the Iron One. Again, when there was a bit of decline, so the exchange did not stop, but then we see more personal utensils,
Hmm.
okay, in a way. Personal utensils being used like handles, okay, or even spindle whorls, and the spindles themselves that are made of ivory, which is
Wow.
very interesting. Yeah.
Right. Because that's a common object. You wouldn't think you would need an ivory
They would made of
variety for.
ivory, which is kind of like a prestige material, but still
Right.
we see it.
Hmm.
Maybe hints to this, we can say to the economic success or the wealth of the trader himself and his
Right.
household members, right?
Hmm.
The one, but if we go back to the late Bronze Age, we can see wonderful things. You see this, for example, over here. This is a game board, okay? And it's like,
Wow.
okay, it's this size. Okay, and it's the famous 58 holes game, okay, which was very apparently it was very popular in the Near East, in the ancient Near East, from the late Bronze throughout the Iron Age. And it's complete. It was found in Megiddo. You can see also you can see there's a, where is it? A comb. The teeth of the comb are missing. Where is it? Here.
Yep.
Okay. A box. This is a one-piece box. Again, it's very large. Just we see this kind of box and we can imagine the original size of
The
the
tusk.
the cast that it was carved from. But it's one complete adorned with lions. These were all found in a cache in Megiddo of the last, we can say, Canaanite prince, the last Canaanite ruler of
Okay.
Megiddo, hoarded many of the wonderful items. And here, burned items This comes from Tel Achish, the Judean Shfela,
Hmm.
from a cultic context, basically. And this is the earliest that we can see. The earliest assemblages or the earliest ivory clusters assemblages are related to cultic activity,
Right.
which is also something interesting.
And then did you have a chance to look at the ivory comb that they found from Lachish as well? Did you
From
sample
Lachish,
that?
no, I haven't. I haven't. They published it. No one asked me. I would be gladly looked at
Well,
it,
it's in
but
the Israel Museum. Just have to go and
I don't
see
know.
if you can take it. I'm just kidding. But that's from, I guess, the potentially is
But
from the.
that's middle bronze, I think
I think
they're
it's
talking about.
later. No, I think it's a little bit.
Later?
I think it's a little bit. I think
Okay.
it's late bronze, but
Late
maybe I'm
bronze. Okay.
wrong.
Okay.
Um, so one more thing I want to talk about is, I mean, the biggest reference in the Bible to ivory items outside of what you'd find from Ahab and even in the book of
Yeah.
Amos, it's mentioned twice during probably Jeroboam the second's time, around that time period, and that is Jerusalem. You have ivory mentioned in King Solomon building a palace, building a throne that used ivory. And then you have a couple of mentions in the Song of Songs, Shir
Yeah.
Shirim of Ivory, which we just have an article in our latest edition of Let the Stone Speak that summarizes Gabriel Barkai's book that he just put out in Hebrew, which talks about the evidence for a 10th century authorship of Shir Shirim based on a lot of different elements. So that would, if I count those two as well back from Solomon's time, it does seem that there is, although we haven't found the ivory objects themselves, the Bible indicates that there was some type of trade network at that time in the use of ivory specifically. Can you speak to anything that you've thought about or based on that?
So, yeah, and I want to divide my answer to two. One, first of all, is that it's true. Our study shows that there is a valid historical background to say that there was a southbound exchange networks that goes probably, okay, also not only, but probably also through the Red Sea, as you mentioned, King Solomon's merchant fleet that was built by Hiram, king of Tyre, right, at the port at the Gulf of the Red Sea, like at Aqaba, not Aqaba, Eilat, Etzion Geber, right? It's
Hmm.
mentioned. So we have this southbound orientation of an oriented network, exchange network. This we can corroborate during this time. Okay, so it gives us some kind of an historical,
Specifically mentioning ivory.
specifically mentioning Ivory, but the place that is mentioned that they went to bring the monkeys and the um, I
Yeah,
don't know
there's
how they
there's debate.
translate
There's debate of Tarshish of where Tarshish is. It is
yeah, in
interesting.
this context, yeah.
It is very interesting because in that context, even with the later context of the Phoenicians, when it's talking about Tyre and they're bringing ivory from the ships of Tarshish,
Yeah.
Tarshish is always mainly thought of as Western Mediterranean,
So
and yet you have all the other items that are mentioned don't come from.
don't come from there. True.
So
But then again, then we might say, okay, there was a more complex exchange network where materials and not artifacts, but raw materials come, let's say, to Egypt, exchanged to somewhere else
right,
via the Mediterranean, and only then arrive. But here, I think we should, following at least the results of this study, we should look for a more direct way.
absolutely,
Okay.
yep,
Southwards, and it's feasible to
right.
go through. We know that the Egyptians themselves sailed along the Red Sea south of the Sahara to bring materials, so it's been recorded, and we can very
Yeah, that's one other
record it.
question I had because where you've got the cataracts of the Nile, which are
Yeah,
parts of the Nile that are a little bit more difficult to they're like rapids and things, and you can't really sail ships through them. And this, where you're getting the elephants from, is the sixth one, past the sixth one, at
yeah,
least if I've read your paper correctly. So,
yeah.
are you saying that it would have been easier to transport all the elephant tusk by the Red Sea rather than a land Nile route? Is that where you're?
I wouldn't definitely say that. Here
Okay.
comes the Nubian connection, we can say.
Okay.
Because when we look at the possible agent, okay, and when we go through and read a little bit more about Egypt's southern neighbor, which is Nubia, based from the first cataract southwards,
Okay.
right, we discover that they were engaged in trade. Okay, trade was an important, a vital part, section or sector of the Nubian economy. Okay. They didn't have the natural environment to develop an agricultural based economy solely based on agriculture, like Egypt with the flooding plains of the
Right.
Nile, okay, that you get more closer to the Mediterranean and the Delta. Okay, the Nile there goes through places like rocky, cut through rocky ridges, and therefore since we can say the early recordings of the Nubian societies, okay, they engaged in trade with Egypt.
Hmm.
Okay, so when you look at the sources themselves, where we located them, past south, kind of the Sixth Cataract and into the Sahel and even further south, then you ask yourself who would be a candidate to produce or to engage in this kind of trade, and adding the fact that you have that this long-lasting kind of 1,000 years of an exchange network that wasn't really affected by geopolitical
Right.
how to say fluctuations or changes.
Hmm.
Okay, so there is someone not only being in a way that I imagine it, it's not only that someone is being only the demand comes from the consumer side, but also probably someone from the distributor's side is pushing this because it is profitable. Okay. And we know it is profitable. We see that it is profitable because it's very prestige and comes only to the highest social strata, right? In each society. So
Hmm.
I think this would explain also the Nubian connection and why it's not necessarily being Egypt, because also when Egypt, okay, was politically disintegrated and still
Yep.
see this exchange
You have so much
continue.
fluctuations in the civilizations of Egypt and the Southern Levant through this period that it's
Yeah.
and elsewhere. But it seems like the peoples to this further to the south, what you're saying is they weren't as affected, and they could maintain their kind of monopoly on this, even though the purchaser might be a different
No,
entity.
for sure. There will still be more, study going on in Nubia, okay,
Hmm.
in the regions of Nubia, because we don't know a lot about. Okay, we know, okay, we know the monuments and we
Right.
know the main cities, but we're still pending, we can say, as an archaeological community, okay, with all the difficulties and challenges that there is to excavate and explore places like Sudan and South Sudan
Yep.
of today, um, but there is a lot of tools in and practices in our toolkits that can help us better understand the Nubian societies, okay, from prehistory to today.
Hmm.
And I think that in the future we'll be able to elaborate a bit more to see how it operates, okay, and what was the structure of society and
Well,
so
that
on.
sounds good. Sounds like you're foreshadowing more research that you're going to bring forward. Well,
For
that's
sure.
I think that's a great summary of what you've done with this paper and
Thank
answering
you.
some big questions that have existed with regarding ivory trade and the sources of ivory. And it seems like we have some good, compelling answers here. I look forward to your new paper. When do you feel
It will
like
come.
when is that research going to come out? Do you feel?
No, it's now it's literally in press
Ah, okay.
somehow. Okay,
Okay.
it will be published as well and deals with these kinds of contexts and the meaning, perhaps the meaning of ivory, as we more or less discussed it.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Harel, for your time. Is there anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
No, thank you very much. I invite everyone to read the paper, and I hope
Great.
you'll enjoy it.
Well, I'll leave links to the paper in the show notes, so everybody will be able to get this, and then we'll keep track of what you're doing, and hopefully have you on the show again to discuss your next bit of research. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dr. Harel Shochat for the interview. And stay tuned. We're going to definitely follow up with him for another interview regarding the archaeological context for the discovery of ivory during biblical times in the land of Israel. Don't forget also to like and subscribe to our channel to make sure you don't miss any of the content that we produce. You can also subscribe to our magazine, Let the Stones Speak. This comes out 6 times per year in full color. It's available to you for free. All you need to do is go to our website, armstronginstitute.org, and you'll find a place there to subscribe, or you can email letters@armstronginstitute.org and put your name and address, and we'll make sure you get a subscription to our magazine.